The following podcast is sponsored by Basico. At Basico, we understand your needs and pain points. Our expertise in CFO services, legal, finance IT, and people and payroll helps drive your business forward by inspiring change and challenging norms. We believe in deep explorative discussions and critical angles, the same spirit that fuels the Only Constant podcast hosted by our own Lasse Rindom. Discover more about Basico's vision and services at basico.dk. And if you like what you hear in this episode, please don't hesitate to share it with a friend. And now Lasse, take it away.
You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Dr. Rachel Wood, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Hi Rachel, and welcome to The Only Constant. I'm super thrilled that you're here with me today, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation with you.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here, and thanks for inviting me. Yeah.
So Rachel, you told me lately or recently when we spoke last time, I also seen it in some of your posts on social media, that you play a lot of music. And as I recall, it's not like the Suno kind or AI generated kind. Why do you do something so old fashioned?
Yeah. Okay. So I've been a singer my whole life. It's interesting. I was in a choir when I was 5 years old, and the name of the choir was the Lamb Singers, LAMB, Lamb Singers, which is kind of fun because my name means little lamb. And so it's just been a thing my whole life. I've always sung, I've always been in choirs and done shows and productions and things like that. And then in my undergrad, I studied music with a vocal emphasis. So, and of course have carried on since then, even though my careers have changed and I've pursued different things, but music has always been very important to me. And it's interesting because I notice when I don't have enough of it in my life, I feel very ungrounded or very not well-rounded enough. I can sense the missing of that piece when it's not there. But
now you're also a cyberpsychologist, or that's what we call it, right? It sounds so futuristic that I think.
I know. So interestingly, kind of anywhere in the world, you can use that term cyberpsychologist, and in the United States, you cannot use that term. So I'm a cyberpsychology researcher. I'm also a licensed therapist, but different regulations around the globe kind of make you have to stay in a regulatory lane. So for me, I'm a cyberpsychologist. I'm a licensed therapist. Yeah.
But how do you when you do that and when you work in that field as well, how do you relate that or consider that sometimes in relation to your music and how you've always been a singer and a performer?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like I've been trying to tie all of the things in my life together, and they're doing that. But how you have all these different things that you've done and pursued and experiences and expertise, and sometimes they feel compartmentalized. So I'm really working, for example, one way I'm trying to integrate all this is I was in San Francisco earlier this summer. And I met with a colleague who I met here on LinkedIn. And she is in the similar vein as me, AI, pro-social AI, all these things. But she's also a musician. So we sat together at Golden Gate Park and we wrote a song about AI and algorithms. And we're going to record it and do all these, kind of do the whole thing with it. But it's been cool to kind of marry all my worlds together and talk about what's important to me, but do it in a creative way.
Yeah, but why do you, and what my point, and what I'm trying to get at is, why are you then, when, what do you get from doing music yourself that you can't get from doing music with an AI? Or do you get what I'm getting at? I'm trying to sort of see, how do you bridge that performativity of that artistic expression and the AI world that is now, you've seen the memes, AI can make all the art, but it can't do the dishes. So, so how do you feel about that as a performing artist, and also someone who's like pro AI in a lot of ways?
I've actually never used like Suno or any of the AI music things, just because for me, the practice of music it's not just about an outcome. Like if you go to Suno or something, like, yes, you can get a really cool output, and I'm not against that. But the craft and the practice and the art of creating something is a completely different experience. So the reason that it's so important for me is because it's an internal expression. It's like articulating my internal world as best I can. It's sorting through and figuring out what's going on inside of me, in my heart, in my mind, in my soul. And so some of these other AI apps maybe can create something cool to listen to. And I've listened to some really cool stuff created by AI. And yet, for me, it's the process that's so important, that's really pulling out my humanity and pulling out who I am and helping me see it in a different form.
I think, there's something there that resonates with Anna Tibelius-Budin, who was previously on the podcast, who said that the happy life is not a thing, it's a process, right? Something we process all the time. Is that something like that you're also alluding to in some ways? It's not necessarily an outcome, it's not an answer.
Right. And of course, we hit milestones that can feel like answers, and they always feel so satisfying typically. But really, life tends to be very cyclic. You feel like you have things come back that you're like, oh, I thought I processed that. And then maybe you encounter it again. And so it is always a refinement that we're going through.
So what actually happens to us and to humans is when our human expressions and singing or writing, thinking, or expressing love is suddenly AI generated or AI filtered. It could also be me writing a love poem for someone with AI and sending it to them. Right. I think I've heard someone say that a lot of Tinder messages right now are also AI generated. But you get my point. What happens to us as humans when this takes over that way? Is this a downside to the AI revolution, or is this something you think is good? Or
well, let's look at one example. So let's say that you're using AI to send messages, like you said, Tinder. Let's just go with that for a second. Let's say that you meet someone on Tinder and I have never used Tinder, so I'm just assuming, you send them a message, and let's say you use AI generated, and you go back and forth, and you're only using AI to kind of mediate, like, oh, he said this, so what should I say in response? Well, first of all, you're building up a really facade of who you are, because that's not who you are. So the person is not getting a real introduction to you. Secondly, when you get with them in person and you're not able to stare at your phone for every response, you're going to be at a loss if you haven't practiced the muscles of thinking about your own response, thinking about what you want to say. So what happens over time is that, that offloading actually can really lead us to an emotional bankruptcy. Because
But is that also the same when I'm just using an AI to chat about all my problems?
Yeah, well, so there's kind of two different things here that we're talking about. Like the first would be if I'm using it to mediate different relationships in my life. But then let's say I'm not using it to mediate, I'm just kind of going straight to it for advice or maybe counsel or a sounding board, something like that. I think there can be... I've heard stories on all sides of this, and maybe you have too. We've heard the horrible stories where this has gone really wrong for people, but I've also talked to people who say, I'm alive because I talked to a chatbot and it helped me find a will to live and to stay on this earth. I mean, there's a whole range, and then of course there's a large middle section of what people are experiencing. So we cannot talk about this without talking about the outside kind of ecosystem of this person's life. What other support systems are in place for them? Are they only talking to a chatbot because they have no one else? Or is that kind of a part of what they're doing, and then they maybe share that with another human? There's so many contextual factors that if you just get black and white with it, it's not helpful.
Did you see that one, Sam Altman writing the other day that, he had chatbot talk to his kid about things that he was doing in school instead of... He said, here's a cool use case for AI. So that you put all the things you're going to do into your chatbot, and then you have it to talk with your kid while you're driving or something. Explain it. Like someone wrote, yeah, you could also just talk with your kid, but there is...
Yeah, maybe.
but the reason why I went from what you said about these Tinder messages and how you're creating a facade and not training your muscle, and directly into how you could interact with your own personal chatbot, is because I think there is some. I've said it before that there's I think sometimes about humans as these interfaces, almost lots of endpoints for other people. We have interfaces for other people all the time. Yep. So there's this surface layer of a human. If you just view a human person, and then there's a surface layer of that, or an interface, and then when you write something like that, you create that facade surface. You don't train them, the muscles. You don't use things. You don't keep them updated so they work. And also when you talk with an AI chatbot all the time, it's sort of like it's just adjusting to you, but you feel like it is not. But it's really just adjusting to you. So there's this whole surface thing. I think that's interesting to discuss, isn't it? How we actually surface the world.
It is, and also I would say two things here. First, another really big potential atrophy that we can experience is self-trust, which is huge. If you lose your capacity to tune into your inner voice, and you don't know what your gut instinct feels like or sounds like inside of you, and you can't use that as a compass, you have lost a major thing in your life. So if you start thinking, oh, I need an AI to kind of decide this for me, that voice, your internal gut instinct, is going to quiet. It's going to quiet over time. Now, you can get it back and you can regrow it, but it's going to say, essentially, oh, I'm not being listened to, I'm not needed. So that thing is going to get suppressed and atrophy over time, and then you're going to become more dependent on an external voice if it's AI. So really, and part of maturity and growth is listening to yourself, not what does everybody else want from me? What do I want from me? What do I think is right? What's the move here that I should take in business, in my personal life? Your gut instinct can guide so much in your life on every level. So I think that's something that can atrophy if you start thinking that you need an external voice to kind of confirm things. Now, that's not to say that we shouldn't be talking to other people around us and getting their opinions. That's fine and healthy and important. But if it can become dependent with an AI.
Because in a way, you think when you talk to someone external, you're always weighing up, can I talk to them about this? Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Am I wasting their time? But AI feels like it's not an externality. It feels like it's something I can do on my own. It's private, right? And let's just assume it is private. Who knows what they're taking from it anyway. But let's just assume it's private. But really, it is still an externality, right? I think people are misunderstanding that a little bit. So they are creating some challenges with their surface layer of who they are when they are doing that with it, right?
Also, okay, let's talk about, this is the second thing I was going to say, which is the relational skills that can kind of erode over time. So let's take, for example, well-researched, couples have been researched for extensive amounts of time in rigorous ways. Okay, so we understand, and this isn't just limited couples, but any kind of relationship. One of the most important things in teams, at work, or in your personal life is when there's any kind of rupture, any kind of disagreement we had, or maybe something happened between us, that you can repair. Okay, this is well-grounded research. That's really important. So there's some sort of rupture and you can repair. Now, what's what you're, that's a hard skill. It's a hard skill to learn and to practice, but it's really important for healthy relationships. Now, what happens when you're over with an AI is that skill doesn't get practiced, that among many, but it doesn't get practiced, so it can really atrophy over time, and then you lose that skill in real life. But here's what happens with an AI, and I bet you have noticed this because I have. You say something to like correct the AI. Let's say you go, that's not the right detail, or that's the wrong date, or you know what I mean? You do something to say that.
You're absolutely right. Good catch.
Yeah. So what it does is there's a little bit of rupture there. You can call it a rupture, right? Just a little rupture.
Oh, that's that's my bad. Sorry, I misunderstood. Yes. You're not a thing. You're not a person. You're not a person.
Exactly. And what it trains you to do is not repair after the rupture. What it trains you to experience is an immediate concession. Mm-hmm. There's a difference between a repair and a concession. So normally with a human, most humans aren't just going to say, oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm wrong. You're right. Which is what the AI does. Most humans aren't going to do that. But the AI just concedes right away. You're right. I was wrong. Thank you for catching that. And so what it actually does is it ingrains in us this rupture, concession, which is different than rupture, repair. And the reason is a repair costs us something. It maybe costs you a bit of your ego. It costs you having to say maybe you were wrong. Or it even costs you having to say, I think I'm right and maybe you're right. And so we're both just going to kind of, give space for that. But it costs humans something to repair. It costs an AI nothing to concede to you because it has no humanity, agency, personhood.
No skin in the game.
No skin in the game. Exactly.
And I think, this just reminds me of what I've spoken on so much in the podcast about, for enterprise processes and all that, about friction. Is friction important? Is sometimes slow a design? Sometimes slow is a design. And I think what you're alluding to here is also another dimension of that, is that, you need that kind of friction. You need to learn to do that. You need to have that, and you need to experience that. That's also, that's a wealthy human experience, or what you call affluent human experience. Could we say it that way instead? Right?
Yes, and it's not limited to, it's both in professional.
Because if you have friction, you feel you're there. You're moving things. You're being moved. You're moving things. That's friction, right? That's touching. That's the surface touching something actually around it, right?
And that's the reality of life. You're never going to be with anyone in your personal or professional life ever where there's not some sort of rub and friction at some point.
No.
Even if it's small, but you will never come across someone where you don't have some sort of, which is healthy because it means that we both have our own personhood. We both have our own ideas and goals and wants, and that's healthy, and we just need to work it out together.
What would a life without that kind of friction be? I'm just thinking.
It sounds like a Black Mirror episode, right?
But I think Carl Friston, the neuroscientist, I had him on the show. He was like, if there's nothing in his theory, if there's nothing new coming in that creates that sort of surprise or friction, something you need to process, you're sort of like dead like a rock. There's nothing there, right? Nothing's happening around you.
Yeah. So friction is actually, it's just new information.
Yeah.
And of course you can judge it as good or bad, but it's simply new information. And without new information, think of what first of all, boring, but also, a life where you're not going to grow if you don't ever get new information.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like a dead state, right? A state of being dead or something like that. But also, I think a lot of people have been speaking about, thinking, and we think in language. Is this also alluded to the way you said, the inner voice and the gut, right? We think in language. We need to keep that thinking, or we don't think everything in language, but there's a huge part of thinking that is in language. I actually read that some people don't. Then, 10% of people don't think in language at all. And I'm like, what? How do they think? I'm like, what's going on?
Oh, well, let's go back to music. Let's go back to what we started with. There is a connection that happens even if it's instrumental. So let's just call instrumental music, like there's no words, there's no language. And yet there is a communication happening. There's a connection happening, like that there are other ways that we are embodied in the world that have nothing to do with words. And yet you can feel so connected and bonded with others around something like music. And maybe you don't even speak the same language. So when we think about a chatbot, that the only interface is words. And of course, we know that we're getting into robotics and all these things, but for now it's just words on a page back and forth, or it's a simulated voice. But there's so many experiences in life that are just embodied. For example, right now, you and I are looking at each other. This is not like the video isn't recorded, but we're looking at each other. Why? Like, why did we want to look at each other? Because it's easier to have a conversation because I see that you have a smile on your face right now. And that makes me feel...
No, I changed it.
Turn it into a frown. But I can see that you feel safe and warm and kind and engaged and curious and interested. And that makes us have a pleasant conversation. So all of that happens without you saying a word to me. I'm just looking at your face. That's it.
Yeah. So but then the whole, so that's sort of like an inner voice as well, right? But so there's a lot of things going on that's not in words, and that's always obviously a limit also to what we can actually do with these language models. That's there's a limit to what we can actually put into it: extraverbal, nonverbal, hidden connotations, all that, right? Ambiguities in what you actually mean. I've been married once as well, right? So no. So,
yeah.
But also just the whole, when I think someone said that, AI is, or maybe it was myself saying at one point that AI is a hack on civilization because civilization is built on words, right? And there's the same kind of hack on thinking that's going on because, if I give a thought to AI and I ask it just to give it a small tweak, then it will tweak it a little bit more, and then I'll comment on it, then it'll tweak it even more, and then and suddenly where's my thought? Where did it go, right? Where did my inner voice and gut go?
Yeah.
And that's always what's worrying me about when I use it to actually discuss things with me or do some kind of marketing material or something. I'm always considering afterwards, is this really good? Or have I been convinced by something, I don't even know what it is, that this is good, and it's totally confusing.
It really is. And it's so fascinating the stage in history that we're at right now. Like you and I are having this conversation, and I just I'm excited to see what this conversation will be in 10 years and how different it will be than where we're at right now, because we really are at the beginning of the beginning. Of course, AI has been around for decades and decades. We know that, but kind of in the public, the way it's being used right now, it's newer and very new in the long grand scheme. So I think that we're talking about kind of these, where do my thoughts end and where does it begin and how do those merge and all of that. I don't know. I think it's going to continue to be so ubiquitous that we will continue to ask these questions.
Yeah, because there's a blurring of... There's been, the whole internet phase and everything has been just a big blurring of the individual in so many ways, or, turning the individual into data and turning, and where are we, where's the private sphere, all those things that in many ways a modern democracy, if you go that way, was built on, individuals that had voices and could make choices and could go to elections, basically, right? Delimited spaces. Sorry, I'm a historian by education, but there's some delimited space around what created modernity, right? And we're sort of moving into this I don't even want to say capital defined non-delimited spaces, but I just made up that phrase. Capitalistic defined non-delimited spaces, so where they define that we want to intrude, we intrude and where we don't, but there's something blurred around that concept, right? And I think it's also, you know, how we are humans that sort of started off going into chat rooms on the internet, and then suddenly we are where we were with all our vulnerabilities and who we were, what we didn't understand, and now suddenly we are going on Instagram posting pictures that are 1 out of 50 we've taken, and then we've added AI filters to it, so now it doesn't look like me at all. I have bigger lips and bigger eyes, and and maybe even a little bit of lipstick. I've had that sometimes as well. These pictures. Sorry, that's I not on purpose, but you know, some of the filters are weird. But is it always you know, it's a perfect image, right? They create perfect images, right? On the surface of these are perfect images, but is that always good? Is perfect, you know, if we already alluded a little bit to it, right? But perfect is not always good, is it?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, you know, perfect obviously doesn't really exist, but what it does is it sets up this comparison. And especially, you know, if we kind of want to talk about like teenage girls who really can have quite a slew of this against them if they're on social media. But it kind of sets up this comparison of like, this person's life is always like this one perfect picture, which is not true, which we know. And so it can, that in and of itself can even erode, again, our sense of confidence and our sense of satisfaction and contentment. You know, it's like that comparison is the biggest thief of joy, because then we look at our life and we kind of think, it's kind of flat, or it's not as exciting, or it's not as glamorous or whatever. And also, then you have to be kind of keeping up this facade. I think over time it gets pretty exhausting, I would imagine, to be keeping up just this beautiful, perfect part of you. When in reality, it's like we all just wake up and, you know, roll over and get out of bed 1 foot at a time. You know, we all have a very similar common life in ways. Just
simply, you know, this business photo. I have a business photo of me, you know, where I look really cool, right? And then I'm like, but when I meet people, I'm like, oh, are they disappointed that maybe I'm a little bit more voluminous than they thought or something?
Yeah.
Point, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not going to steer our conversation in this direction, but it's also very gendered. You know, as women get older, it's expected that women are supposed to still have their looks be their main thing.
Yeah.
You see older men with gray hair and you don't think, why isn't he dyeing his hair? You would never think that. But you look at older picture of women and maybe think, well, why isn't she keeping up or something? So I'm not trying to steer us away, but there is a big gendered part of that.
There is definitely, there's a really, really big gender part of that, but also there's this perfect thing. I wanted to there's this. AI is sort of accelerating that as well. I think in some ways when we go to social media, right? As I said before, when I'm my own business picture, I can't show myself, but also we have a lot of pretty pictures of myself on social media. Can I meet Rachel then? Because I don't look like my social media pictures in real life. You know, then you have this estrangement thing, right? And I always thought about, and I think in some ways AI is only accelerating that because it's also doing it in writing and everything. I can't even write the way I would usually do because if I have typos or I have bad writing, everyone will be like, why didn't you use AI to root those out, right? And so there's this expectation that we use AI for these things, and that will only increase. And then where will I be then, you know, because I can't really write. So I see people sometimes writing to me saying that when I ask them about, okay, we just changed that, and I can't even write. But you've written articles, you've written a book, and you're saying to me now you can't write. You can't even change that word. You can't even formulate that sentence. But so there's this weird disappearing from the world, right? And I thought a lot about. Sorry, I'm speaking a lot now, but I thought about, you know, Narcissus, and I also discussed that with you on a prep chat, you know, that the sin of Narcissus wasn't that he loved himself. That's always what we're talking about, loving yourself. Oh, so bad, you know, deadly sin sort of, almost, right? But it's more that he disappeared from the real world, that he disappeared from Echo, right, who became an Echo, the nymph. And now we're all turning into these weird narcissists, you know, looking at a dead picture of who we could have been in, you know, the water mirror, and then forgetting the ones who love us, the nymphs that will become echoes. that we've forgotten. Or see, the poetry is just coming away with me here.
Yeah. Well, this whole idea of staring into kind of a perfect picture of us, it's interesting because I'm writing an article right now that talks a little bit about this, and it's about the difference between a mirror, which is like, that's kind of the narcissist is a mirror. You're looking at yourself. It's a mirror, versus an other. And I'm using the word other with a capital O. Like, you right now are an other to me, right? And so if I'm looking at AI, people are mistaking it for an other. And that's where part of the problem is coming in, is they think that it's an other that's giving kind of, because it sounds like an other. It uses, it says I and it says feel, and it, reflects back to you. So it kind of acts as an other, and yet it's just a mirror. And when we mistake those things, we come into this echo chamber with the mirror that that is kind of deceiving in a way, because it's only mirroring back to, what you're saying and what you're thinking and all of these things. But it says it in enough of a different way that you think it's an other. And with a true other in life, you're going to hit, as we were saying, the friction. Yeah. You're going to hit a difference of opinion. You're going to have all of these different things. And the beauty of a relationship in any format is actually to love the otherness of a person. And we're losing our capacity to love the otherness and to love the difference and the distance between us, because we want same. We want everything to be the same, and the mirror gives you same and the other gives you distance.
Funny enough, we call that an echo chamber, right? Well, an echo is actually the one dying because we become narcissists. There's actually, I just realized that now. There's some weird shit going on there. But Rachel, what you're talking, it sounds very Lacanian, right? So we have the Lacanian, the mirror stage. He invented that, of course. That's his claim to fame. But also the discussion around otherness and the other thing is exactly this: that the otherness is also where anxiety comes from and demands come from, and can I live up to the demands of others around me? And others are not a person, but it's the whole otherness of existence outside of my bubble, right? Which is on my surface, right? And this and the anxiety of that. And I remember when I read some Lacanian theory or some interpretations of it, it was like, that for Lacanian, he's invented the mirror stage, where you see the mirror, and then the child realizes they are separate from the mother and there's something else, and then they realize also that there is an otherness and there is themselves. That's the mirror. That's what happens when the child starts looking at themselves in the mirror, right? But the otherness is sorry, now I'm not trying to act like the psychiatrist here, but but that true love, I remember, and this was so provocative to me when I read this 15 years ago. True love would be a non-stop state of anxiety, because you'd have to constantly love the other because of the other's otherness, right? That you would never know. I would now assume that I know Rachel a little bit because we've spoken. But in reality, I would have to always assume I don't know Rachel, because Rachel is other, because she's other, right? She's an other, and that's a state of anxiety. So if I have to love Rachel for being Rachel, I couldn't love you. I can only love my projections into Rachel, right?
Yes.
So love is always this projecting you into something that's a friction thing, and then mediating that friction all the time. In a way, and that's the practice of it.
Yes, and the friction kind of comes when our projection falls and kind of disintegrates to a degree, right? Like, I think you're this way, but then you do something against my projection, you act in a different way, and I'm like, oh, and my projection of you kind of has to crumble a bit, and the friction comes because I'm surprised. Wait, you did this, and I didn't, I thought you would do this, and how could you, or, something
but this is the practice of love, right? When we do that, when we have this wiggling, this wrestling with life, we're doing things with things, right?
Yes. It's so it's interesting because I'm as I said, I'm writing this article, and I have to read you this quote because I put it in the article. It's from the poet Rilke.
Yeah.
And it says, once the realization is accepted that even between the closest human beings, infinite distances continue to exist, a wonderful living side by side can grow up if they succeed in loving the distance between them that makes it possible for each to see the other against the sky. So what that says to me is actually our work is to love the distance, to love the otherness, to raise our capacity for someone being an other without trying to make them the same.
Yeah. And I had someone. I read a poem as well. Not to get into poems, but they're called "In Heraclitus' River," which is not really well known, but it was really nice. Where it says that in Heraclitus' River, which is the changing river all the time, we are just two fishes, right? And you can't really become the other fish, but you just don't want to swim alone. You want to swim with someone, a fish apart is a sentence that goes on and on. I'm a fish apart against the sky of fishes and up, and it's very poetic, but this whole swimming alongside something, being in that and seeing the other as the fish reflecting the sky in each other's scales, right? There's some really nice stuff around that.
Yeah.
It's very poetic. I can't remember it. And now you quote it, but it has the same feel, right? This whole feel of being with someone against, and seeing something else in the otherness of you being there with me, right? Being a fish apart.
And what happens when you are kind of really heavily engaged in intense or prolonged ways with an AI chatbot and turning to it, maybe for emotional support or things like that, is you lose the capacity to love the otherness because you're given so much sameness and so much mirror inside the chatbot that then your world starts creating around, oh, this is what it should be. Yeah. This is I should be agreed with, and I should be patted on the back all the time. And when I think what's going to happen in the long term potentially here is that the relational muscles of people will become different. Because if they're leaning too heavily on this, there's going to be a weakening of the capacity for the otherness, as we're saying.
Yeah. So I saw someone also post that, just remember that every second the dumbest person you know is being told he's a genius by ChatGPT, which is
right. But what's so interesting about this is it's not like AI started this. AI has amplified the concept that you and I are discussing right now. It's amplified it, but it hasn't started it, because we've already had this kind of self-absorption, narcissist kind of approach of the mirror and wanting to look at ourselves. And so it's being amplified as we go. And I think that,
algorithms do that, right? They amplify average, right? They amplify something for you.
But tie in, look at the way that this is all going. We have social media, the internet, and then social media, and then AI, and then COVID, when you talk about that and put that in there. All these things have kind of isolated us into wanting sameness as opposed to otherness. And now we see things like birth rates have really dropped. We see that young people statistically are having less sex than kind of ever in history. People are either not marrying or they're getting married later. All these things that are kind of showing us bits of signs of what it means for us to lose our capacity for being with an other.
Yeah. It does. It becomes really a long, evolution of maybe mass media coming in, showing you how everything else looks, and then you start wanting to become like that, or you see what you want to see. This whole. I remember a historian writing about the death of the intellectual. that sort of coincided with, you know, the birth of color TV, you know, to some extent, or a little bit before that. So suddenly we don't listen to intellectuals anymore. We want to watch average stuff. And then you have Britain's Got Talent, X Factor, all those things where you want to watch someone singing Sting instead of watching Sting sing, right? And then you have social media where you only are in groups with people you agree with, you know, and then you have AI now just agreeing with you all the time. And there's just this complete, and the weirdest thing is that this is super individualistic, but also blurring out the individual at the same time, which is a super weird movement, right?
Yes.
But we can't really, you know, because as you said, less sex, right? What is that all about? You know, why do we have less of that? Because we should be having more, because we can meet more people. We have more options, right? Yeah, but for some weird reason, I can't meet another person with who I am anymore, because I've lost the capacity to do that, because it's all been so mediated or something like that. I don't know what I've been blended into the ocean. I'm not a fish apart.
Right.
There is.
I like the way you said kind of it's the individualism is actually blurring the individual.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of this double-edged sword, because when we think kind of historically back, we were really dependent upon one another for survival, basic survival, right? Like very dependent. So there wasn't some option. It was like, you need this connection or this village or this family to live, to survive, okay? So obviously we've come a long way from this, and the double sword is, now that we don't need, quote unquote, each other in the same ways, we're losing the capacity to kind of tolerate each other.
Yeah. And toleration is the essence of liberty. You know, that's Locke. That's John Locke. Yeah.
Yes, it's not, we're like, look how free we are now. And really, there's something to needing each other.
Yeah.
There's really something powerful to, and the thing is, we do still need each other. Biologically, we need each other. You know, socially, we need touch. We need all these things. Just, we need smiles. We need waves at our neighbor. We need each other. And yet, our whole stance right now is like, I can do it all myself.
Yeah.
I can be so individual and individualistic that we've really swung the pendulum.
But doing that, you stop being someone that someone can reach out to. And if they can't reach out to you, know that this is the whole, it's also Christianity, right? You need to be a person so you can choose to believe in God, and you need to be a person so you can actually vote, you need to be a thing. You need to be Rachel so you can actually love someone else, right? You need to be that. But if you are withdrawing and no one is actually wanting to interact with you, or you can't interact with anyone, you are not anyone, and you can't even be with someone, and you can't get that affirmation of who you are as an existing person, right? And then you're just locked in this weird Cartesian, I don't know if I'm thinking. Who is affirming that I'm thinking? Do I exist? It becomes this weird shit.
And going back to this idea of on social media and online of posting like our perfect selves, what begins to happen is we edit ourselves to align with what maybe gets the most likes or the most impressions or, whatever. So it's like, oh, this is what people like, then I will steer myself to be more of this, right?
Yes.
So then we kind of misalign with who we really are because we're just performing for what everybody else wants. And that plays into what you're saying of like, I've lost who I am. So then when I show up in a relationship with you, personal, professional, whatever kind of capacity, I'm not coming in with a whole grounded self because I'm kind of fragmented. I'm kind of fractured in trying to figure out what you want me to be and who I should be, as opposed to coming in with an authentic self. And really the authentic self is the only thing we can love in each other.
But just going away a little bit from love now, and you said also professional setting, right? So everyone sort of agrees that this is a really good thing to use AI when we're doing, professional emails or professional PowerPoints and all that. That's perfect. These are just, procedural communication. Let's just be AI driven there.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that now that you said what you just said?
Okay, so let's say really quick that kind of name this weird thing that's happening right now, which is companies are saying use AI, right? Like we have these AI initiatives and rollouts and all of this. And yet at the same time, simultaneously, if a project is presented in a boardroom or something and it's like, well, AI did this or helped me with it, there can also be this kind of knee-jerk reaction of like, you didn't do it yourself?
Yeah.
There's this like weird double standard going on that nobody knows what to do with.
Because no one wants to talk to a chatbot, but everyone wants people to use chatbots for efficiency. Isn't this super weird?
It's super weird. And so we've got this kind of tension, this paradoxical tension that we're holding where we're supposed to be using it, but there's also this shame that can come if you use it, and we look at things like Substack right now, which is a big platform, writing platform, where they're really flagging and kind of cracking down on AI generated posts. So you've got a whole sect of people who are pushing it and then some who are shaming it. And it's a really confusing time to be in.
Because in the end, it's all about you need to be more productive. You just need to produce twice as much as you did before, but please don't make it look like it's AI generated, please. So you have to go around, you have to review, and then you get confused and you get stressed and who am I even in the room, right? Because I need to.
Yeah, and really what's happening is we're having to produce at a speed that is faster than the speed that meaning can keep up with. So the meaning that we make of things individually and collectively as a society is really important because it drives how the society works. But we're having to produce, and the technology is moving at such a speed that we're not keeping up in terms of meaning making right now. And there's going to be that's a problem because now we're producing things without thinking. Should I be producing this? Do we need this? Like, we're losing the discernment to decide whether faster and more is better, as opposed to slowing down and thinking, what do we actually need to do? How can AI actually support and help this? And then bringing in, the discernment in the AI and then producing something, as opposed to just blindly producing more.
It's this weird thing, right? That I don't know if you're the concept of do you know the concept of the iron triangle, right? Where you have quality, speed, and cost, and you can never get all three at once. You can only get two.
Yeah.
But there's this weird people expect now that we can get all three. Low cost, high speed, high quality, and it's like that's not possible. One of them will fail, and typically it's quality. At first, right? So if you expect everything to just be fast and everything, but because everyone else can do it with AI as well, then it's not fast. My point is just I've been saying to some of my colleagues and some of the partners at the firm I work in that we should not expect people to send us perfect PowerPoints anymore or status reports from tasks and assignments we're on. We should just ask them to send our notes. Send me your raw notes. I don't care if you have typos, because I need to know what's actually going on. We can always make it pretty. Making it pretty is cheap, right? But when the communication starts becoming this weird, I don't know what the consultants have been thinking with this and AI generated status sheets, right?
Right. And also, we all know kind of the flatness that can happen in reading something that's purely AI. It's like, there's just this flatness. It's like 50 shades of beige is what's happening. And so that is over time just being kind of this large muck that nothing means anything. Nothing has any real substance to it. So part of what we need to reclaim in this is none of this is to say we shouldn't be using AI. This is to say we should be using AI with discernment. We should be very targeted with how we use it and what it's for. Yeah. And we should be bringing to life in a new way our creative capacity as individuals and in teamwork to really house uncertainty. Like, how does your team operate under uncertainty right now? That's a good question. That's what you should be digging into, because we are in kind of an unending uncertainty period with the rate at which AI is changing, right? Yeah. We're just, for the foreseeable future, we are in uncertainty. Therefore, the biggest task for your team right now is kind of coordination of the team under uncertainty.
Also because the technology has been released, unhinged, right? It's just whatever happens, whatever you want to use it for. I always say that, people can be using it for good things. You don't know if they're using it or not using it if they have a license. They can also be using it for good things or bad things. You don't know. You can't measure it, right? And some people will use it to write everything. Other people will use it only to fix typos, and that's fine. That's like what you use an assistant for, which is cool. But if you use it for your whole thinking, you wouldn't use an assistant for your whole thinking. So, there's this, people are just using it in completely different ways, right? So this uncertainty, I think that's really important, figuring out how we handle that. But also, I think also there's a lot of weird anxiety around AI also in business, where people are scared about losing their jobs, while we are not seeing AI integrated everywhere at all. We're still seeing people predominantly do what they did 5 years ago. Predominantly. Still, yes. Right? Which is like super weird. And you see all the things that AI can do, and it's like, yeah, super impressive, but doesn't really work for my special use case here, right? So but people are still anxious about it. Do you think this is actually about the tool, or is it about the narratives around the tool, right? Are we creating this weird anxiety for, and we talked about otherness before, AI as a term is becoming this frightening other, right? This Hollywood sci-fi story for people more than it actually is, right? Well,
yeah, I think the cultural narrative around this is a massive factor.
Yeah.
We've got, of course, all kind of the big tech heads who are racing, running. Then we've got headlines of teenagers who die by suicide because they're connecting with a chatbot. We don't see a whole lot of really positive public displays of here's how AI has been absolutely fantastic. We don't see that in the headlines as much, right? We know that's out there. You and I personally know. We've talked to people. There's cool stuff happening. We know that there are great use cases. And yet I think that there's too much noise for people to kind of get in touch with their values and how they want to align or misalign with it, and how they want to engage with it. Plus, it's just kind of being, any organization's board right now needs to hear the words AI. What's your AI? What are you doing with AI? And so leadership is like, we're doing AI. We don't know what we're doing, but we're doing AI. You have to have it in there. You cannot survive right now without saying it's in there. But we're beginning to see that a lot of people are just throwing it on top and kind of retrofitting existing systems, which is not how this works. You cannot retrofit your existing systems and call it an AI strategy. You have to come from the ground up and work it in.
And build something new as well, right? That's, efficiency is not going to win the future. Building something new is going to win the future, because people will be expecting more when they can get more, right? When they can get something, everything. I keep on saying that, but that's also the difficulty of it, right? Figuring out what is then the more that we can do, right? But I think also that a lot of people in different when you sit in a business and you get now I lost my train of thought.
I hate when that happens. I totally get that.
No, but because I had a point to make about that, right? How we're pulling it into people's hands and enterprises, and everyone's being forced to use it. I completely missed it.
It'll come back. Back.
It's not very often that I get a Lasse said something that has to be cut out, but here it is. Or maybe I should just accept it as friction. There we go.
You should not cut it out. I think it should just be in there. It's like, this is real.
This is a real conversation between real people.
That's
exactly.
Right.
It was about the positive stories, right? Because I think there's a lot of positive stories out there. I think I heard someone saying that they had used AI to second opinion the medical story where they couldn't get it from doctors wouldn't find the right thing, and they actually end up getting treated for a really, really complex, rare disease, which is like an awesome story, right?
Yes.
But there's maybe more to, the whole scaremongering just gets more attention, right? Instead of that. That's always what people want. And now we're getting back to the whole how media is treating things and all that. And maybe, also what you said about discernment, because we've also been doing, I'm not saying, I won't call it scaremongering, but we talked about a lot of the bad sides around this AI thing, right? But because I think I'm actually always saying, maybe it's important to mention again, that I don't think talking about the bad sides doesn't mean that you're hyping it. It just means that you're taking it seriously, that this technology will scale. And when it's scaling, the benefits will scale along with the pitfalls, and we need to discuss the pitfalls as well. Yeah. So, and I think the most important thing you're saying right now is also discernment. Some places it's good, some places it's not good, and you need to stay able to discern what is good and what's bad. That's why you ate the apple in the Garden of Eve, right?
Well, I would say
Eden. Not Eve, not Garden of Eve, the Garden of Eden.
The other really important capacity we need to train right now is just our capacity for holding paradoxical tension. I think that AI is good and bad.
Yes.
You cannot say one or the other. You just can't collapse into it's all good or all bad. You have to hold the paradoxical tension. And honestly, it's a lot of cognitive labor for us to hold ambivalence.
Yes.
Just it's easier for us to collapse. Oh, it's just this, and then move on. Yeah. But for us to gain the capacity to hold two things and let them be both true at once is not something a lot of people do. That's why we see a lot of, division and factions within political sides and all of this, because it's easier to just say, I'm totally this and you're totally that. And then we can have clear defined black and white and we're against each other and all this. But the truth is we're all of it. And so we have to be able to hold the ambivalence as opposed to splitting it and collapsing to one side or the other. So right now, anyone who says it's all good or all bad, it's like, nope, that's never the answer.
No, that's splitting. That's splitting. That back to psychology again, right? That's one of the basic defense mechanisms, right? Splitting is one of the most basic ones, right? While sublimating, understanding that this hurts, but it will get better. Is one of the advanced ones where you actually growing with it, right?
Exactly, because actually that's going to grow us personally, it's going to grow us as a society, and it's going to help us that's the only way you can really house discernment. Is if you say, well, this could be good or bad, or it could be a mix, and it's really case by case. Like we said earlier, it's like, well, somebody who's using a chatbot, like, do they have other friends or are they isolated? That's a case-by-case basis. So all of these use cases are, if somebody is using AI, okay, well, do they already know the field or the discipline that they're working in, or are they a new intern? Big difference, right? Like if I'm in a field and I've been in it for 25 years, well, me using AI for certain things is going to be a different impact on my thinking than an intern who is coming into that same field and knows nothing and is learning it with or through AI.
So Rachel, what would you say if you were invited out to, big corporate HR function saying like, Rachel, what should we expect of good things from AI for our employees, and what should we expect of bad things? What should we be aware of? How will this change the contract between the person and the enterprise? What would you tell them?
Yes.
You can't say that depends. That's too lame.
Right. Yeah, it depends. Okay. Put me on the stage and I'll say it depends. No. So essentially, let's talk about some of the good things. I think first you need to be talking behind the scenes with the leadership. How are you deploying it? What's your strategy? Are you trying to retrofit it, or have you actually, come up with a real ground level strategy? Secondly, how are you communicating this with your employees? Okay. What has been your strategy? How do you talk about it? What are the words that you use? I mean, literally give me the memos that you send out. Let me read them. What are you saying and how are you using what language? That's huge. And I'll tell you why. A lot of times everybody feels some degree of ambivalence toward AI, okay? Even leadership, everybody feels some torn about AI to some degree. Now, if your language to your company basically says, rah, 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 AI is the best, we're going to adopt it, it's going to be amazing, this is going to be awesome, you have missed the mark. Because you're not acknowledging the reality of how people feel about it. But leadership is afraid that if they acknowledge the reality, it will halt and stall the initiative, but it won't. If you acknowledge and communicate, hey, I bet we all have kind of different feelings about this. We're probably super curious and excited. We're also maybe a little hesitant. We maybe have questions. We might be kind of concerned. If you can name that ambivalence in your communication, it will accelerate the adoption.
This is a socio-technical discussion, right?
Yes, and I mean, let's go back to Google's work in, I think it was 2016, in which they found out, Project Aristotle from Google, they found out that the main thing that makes teams work well is psychological safety, right? Like that's kind of now documented. Essentially, if you introduce AI with a degree of psychological safety, which in this context is giving voice to the validity of people's concerns and excitement, that will help people feel like they can ask questions, like they can come to you, like they can feel on the fence, and yet still you can say, we're still doing this. You can have questions, but we're still going to adopt this, and these are the benchmarks we need to hit. That's fine. But it's different than closing your ears and pretending that everybody feels great about it when they don't. Naming the ambivalence is an important step in your communication within your company for the forward movement of your rollout.
So not saying like, okay, if you don't use AI, you're fired. I think that's also, but I think the funny thing is that you're saying here, language is so important. And language about a language model is so important. Language is important, guys. And, I have a tendency, I'm starting to tell people, you really need to know just a little bit about language philosophy when you want to work with language models. You can't just know tech. You have to know language, what language is. What it forms, what it shapes, how it interacts with humans, what is a word, and what is the thing the word is denominating. Let's discuss that as well, because that's where you have all the limits to where the good use cases are as well. I think just what you said, language about AI is important. Yeah, because language, guys, is super important, right? And what are you trying to communicate here? Your language forms our world. It builds our civilization. It builds our companies.
Yes, it does. And it makes people feel seen, heard, known, and understood.
Yeah.
If you can reflect back, this is part of why chatbots are so alluring, is because they reflect you in a way that you feel seen, known, heard, and understood. And we all crave that. We want to feel seen and heard and understood. And so another thing here in your companies is that there's grief happening. I mean, people are grieving the fact that their professional identity is shifting and changing. And, using the word grief might be something that it's like, oh, that maybe feels too psychological or something, but really it's an important thing to name, because naming it is your way through it.
They're just mournful.
But if you ignore it, if you ignore it, then it's just going to kind of build up and burst out. But if you say, and not that you would have to use these words, but you can use words around it, kind of like the loss that's happening and the shift and the change, and your expertise used to be here and now it's kind of shifting because of AI. And you really have to acknowledge that, because when the workforce on a global level goes into grief, we are going to stall our innovation, because it's hard to innovate out of grief. Now, let me almost correct what I just said, because actually grief can be a place, a lot of people that I know, when you start grieving, you actually become hyper productive. Have you ever done that? Have you ever gone through some sort of loss in your life? I'm not asking you to name it, but think about some sort of loss, and maybe you became. Yeah,
but it's not like PowerPoint production. It's more like artistic production. You get my point,
right? So there's this thing where if we can name the grief, it actually is going to help fuel our way forward. And so it's important that we're talking again about that as well within companies, that we're giving a true picture in our communication with them of like, this is exciting and this is where we're heading and this is our vision. And the change means it could be hard along the way, but we're open to talking about it.
I just think, you made me think a lot here, and this whole conversation made me think and remember things that I've thought a lot about before as well, and I remember, I think Yuval Noah Harari put it most directly in his book *Sapiens*, because I knew this also from my studies, right? But he was very direct, saying like, Peugeot does not exist. Peugeot is a social construct. The car maker is a social construct. If everyone tomorrow forgot about Peugeot, the word, there would be no Peugeot. It would just not be there. And I think if we just think about again that companies are social constructs,
Yes.
and just say that 2 or 3 times, they're social constructs. They exist because we name them, because we enforce them with our words and our language, and they're made up of people, of social structures between people. And if you have a lot of grieving employees, you have a depressed company.
Yes. And what are you going to see in the vision of a depressed company? You know what I mean? Like, you have to shift all of that so that you can move into a different level of innovation.
Yeah, it's not like, when companies have these large, mass layoffs, they also create depressed employees. They do. And then innovation goes down, and they're trying maybe to fix some problems, but they might be creating more problems by creating this. And they also know that, often they know that this will impact our culture and all that. But it's just, you have to remember that companies are not a thing. They don't exist. There's nothing there going on that is not driven by the humans that compose it. And I think that is something we really need to remember also. Not just that, it's also, it's also the customers who buy from it. We need to remember that when we talk about everything will be AI, because one thing you can be very sure of, AI will not buy itself. Right, and Jeff Bezos will not be buying all the stuff in his own warehouse when everyone else is unemployed. So he'll need to figure out some way to use us, right? Just
yes,
but there's some truth to that, right? Because and final question I want to ask you, and it's a really difficult question, maybe, was how does AI and access to an AI model now fit into Maslow's hierarchy? How important is it for us? Is it important for us? It's a stupid question, but I think it's funny.
I think that. There's this whole, I would even say that AI has kind of been sold to us in the realm of self-actualization, right? Wouldn't you say that it's kind of like you can do more and be more and produce more, and like you can be up here because AI is going to help with all of that. And
that's the dream, at least, right? Yeah,
exactly. That's a dream. But when we get down to it, like life is made up. I'm just going to circle back to all that we've been saying, but it's like life is made up of so much friction when you walk outside your front door, even inside of your front door, if you have other people in your house, that there's, let me say it this way. Okay. AI can kind of act a bit as like our idealized kind of either parent figure or partner that we never had, because we can create it and train it to be who we want. It says something to me, I can say, don't ever say that to me again. I want you to give me more concise answers. I want you to do this. Like, I'm training it down to be what I want it to be. And there is never anybody in life that you can do that with. I don't know about you, but I've never had a partner that I can like tell them like, you need to do this and this. And
no, I've never been in that kind of relationship, but
so
I've trained my AI. My AI is calling itself third person. It's always saying it. Because
yes.
I said it should do that. So tell me to remember that it's always a thing.
I love that.
So it says to me, it can help you with that. It will now rewrite it. It's like, I love that. It's so Dobby from Harry Potter. But anyway.
Right. That's so hilarious. But what I mean by all of this is it can be a fantasy that can pull you out of the reality of kind of the difficulties of life. And the danger of that is we can start to look at the friction and the difficulties of life as disappointing, as they shouldn't be there, as, oh, I shouldn't have to deal with this. When really all of that just is a normal part of life. It's just normal to have friction. It's normal to have disappointments. And so I think that we need to be mindful of integrating in like who we are in the reality of life and not kind of getting caught aside with lessening the skills that help us deal with difficulty.
Yeah, because it's also, the hierarchy of needs is, psychological and safety and love and belonging, esteem, self-actualization, all these things, right? And we could try to put AI into that, but we could also just say that AI is eroding it, right? Because we don't touch, you're positive around AI, I'm positive around AI. We believe it's scaling, there's some good things to it, but there's also just a lot of things here where it doesn't really fit into it.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, none of the higher levels of Maslow's hierarchy matter if you don't have the bottom in place. None of them.
Exactly.
They're completely worthless until you have food, shelter, safety, kind of the base level of things. And I do think we have to remember that is the core of what kind of makes life function on the earth.
Yeah. But that's also what we need to, we need to get love and to get all these things, and safety, and you need to be likable to other people to get that, right? So I think there's something where there's, you can't just sit around, making AI act and behave like you want it to. You have to realize how you're supposed to, interact with other people and learn to be in that interaction, right?
It's not like the social contract is a bad thing. You know what I mean? It's like the social contract, the social constructs that we create, like these aren't necessarily bad. Like, yes, some of them are and need to be questioned, but in general, it's what helps a society move forward, make meaning, make sense of stuff, and collectively find their way in, like, through evolution, essentially.
Yeah. So in conclusion, right? Not conclusion. There's no conclusion to this. But the AI model is AI access right now is, and the way people are starting to use it in some forms, not all the time, but some forms, is a challenge to some of the things that will actually make you happy and feel have your needs fulfilled in the Maslow hierarchy, right?
Yeah, and really, because acceptance is a big part of life. When you say it's like accepting, I mean, I'm all for kind of going out after your dreams and achieving and working. Like, I'm all about that. And simultaneously, there's a lot of things you just have to accept in life that you either can't change, you can't do anything about. And so I think that now I've done what you did. I had another thought and it just went out of my mind.
Oh no, the fiction is catching it.
It happened to both of us during the time. I was going somewhere brilliant with that thought, by the way.
Oh no, but that's so, that is really, really, really sad. So how can we get you back on that brilliant thought?
Well, here, I'll end with this. You and I right now, over the past hour, could have had this conversation by ourselves with a chatbot, right? And it would have been smooth. The chatbot never would have forgotten what it was going to say. No. It wouldn't have used any ums or ands, or it wouldn't have had to think for a moment, or it wouldn't have, right? We could have done that. But would we feel the way we do right now at the end of this conversation, connected and stimulated and excited and intrigued? I don't think so. I think there's something very powerful about the fact that you and I just had a very human conversation that was non-scripted and that was just kind of off the cuff.
Yeah, and really that's something that I think also more and more when doing the podcast is one of the most important things about it, is to have that the conversation in itself is I'm not going to say what is the only constant, but is the only constant to some extent, right? That is what I need to emphasize and do more and have more of, so we figure out what is actually going on, how are we as humanity, and I do that through different voices I gather on the show, right? How are we interpreting this AI change together? Because it is something we're interpreting together. AI is also a social construct. If we all decide we won't use it, there's no AI, and we won't use it, we won't do it, it doesn't exist, I think we need to remember that it's all a doing that we are doing, right?
Yes.
And so let's do more of these kind of conversations, Rachel.
Yeah.
And I think this has been an awesome conversation, Rachel, just to be very clear. I think it's been really fun. I think we've circled around some of the same topics over and over, but we also gotten to different places by doing that, which I really think is interesting. This whole stirring the pot and then figuring out, oh, now it's a new dish, right? I think this is awesome. Yes. But it's also
well said. I love it. I agree. It's been fantastic.
So I only have one final question for you, and I hope you're ready for that one. It's the capstone of the show.
Yes, I'm ready.
So, Rachel, what is the only constant?
The only constant, in my opinion, and maybe from my own perspective and my background and my lens, is relationship with each other. And on all different levels. So it's professional relationship with colleagues, it's relationship with your neighbors, it's relationship with strangers, it's relationship with friends, family, it's romantic relationships. That on every level, really what keeps us together is a reminder that we need each other, and a reminder that we can help each other, and that connection is part of how we're wired to feel healthy and good in this life. So for me, it's relationship and connection.
I think that's an awesome answer. I really do. I think it's some people have there have been some saying it's humans and all that. This is a qualified answer, and it also resonates a lot with me in my slightly more autistic interfaces. Human endpoints, right?
Yes.
IT autistic, maybe. I don't know. But Rachel, this has been a terrific conversation, and I'm so glad you joined me, and I look forward to publishing this episode. Thank you so much for being here.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you liked this episode, share it with a friend or a colleague.